Okay, here we are. And please,
So,
Francesca, you.
hi. Yeah, good evening to everybody. We are having this conversation with Kishonna Gray, um, who I will quickly introduce. Hi, Kishonna. Um, okay, here she is. Hi.
Hello. How are y'all doing?
We are very happy to have you here, and I'm actually very happy to meet you for the first time, even if we have the filter of our laptops. So I will quickly introduce you. Please feel free to add any information if I miss something important. So Kishonna Gray is now assistant professor in the Department of Communication and Gender and Women Studies at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And you previously served as an MLK scholar and visiting assistant professor at MIT in comparative media studies and the women and gender studies program. And you've also been a faculty visitor at the social media collective at Microsoft Research. You define yourself as an interdisciplinary, intersectional digital media scholar, and your research area includes identity, performance, and online environments, embodied deviance, cultural production, video games, and Black cyberfeminism. Okay, actually, the interesting fact here is that Ilaria and I are working actually in quite different but complementary fields of research, which for many reasons are strictly connected to your interests. And I would like you to start from one of the keywords you wrote in the statement, which is tech fail. We are all aware of the role of tech on one side in perpetuating social discriminations, but on the other side as an effective agent that can foster social inclusion. And I think you have a lot of interesting experience in this field to share with us. So I let you the floor.
Yeah. Absolutely. So first off, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I love the concept of like tech fail, right? Because I'm a a younger millennial, so I watch fails a whole lot like on YouTube, right? So then I think about where does this concept of fail come from? So when you watch fails, people are doing, epically wrong things, they're putting themselves in harm's way, they're doing things that aren't that smart, right? And then something bad happens, right? And so I wanted to like flip this concept to think about, okay, well, what are like these academic fails? What are the tech fails? What are kind of like design fails? What's like the pathway in the process that gets us to the point of a fail, right? So you have a whole institution and an entire structure that basically ignores and omits and excludes entire swaths and populations of people, right? And so they're being like left out, right? But then you also have all these examples of people like me and people like, Sophia Noble, people like Andre Brock, people like Anna Everett, you folks, everybody who's told them, hey, tech is rooted in this white supremacist, capitalist, hetero patriarchy. Like it's rooted in these things we keep telling you, yet you continue to do the same things over and over again, right? So the learning's not happening. So they're just like in a perpetual state of failure, right? And so I use the concept of like tech fail because I was also thinking about something called, it was like caption fails. And so people were like laughing, and it's like a whole comedy section, like on YouTube, like of caption fails. But this is very ableist, and it's really awful that people are laughing. Like, so let's say when, like the captions are going like on a screen or something, and then, it's messing up. So but we're laughing at it because we can hear, what the person's saying. But think about people who, who are hard of hearing or deaf, and they can't follow along. And then they're just reading all this gobbledygook and they don't know like what's going on. So that's like a caption fail. So, but I'm really fascinated with this concept of like fail because I think we often, think that these people are like, it's unintentional and there's no malintent. But we have to start thinking that maybe this is, there's something like ingrained into the psyche and just embedded into like a lot of these cultures. So that's where like a lot of my work is like just rooted in, just really highlighting and illuminating like the failures and where people are going wrong. Because so many of these companies, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna shut up because I know y'all got another question to ask. But so many of like these companies just want to focus on like, well, we did this, we issued a statement, we're doing all these great things. But I'm like, well, you have to think about, the structure and the legacy that you're connected to that led to a lot of these failures, but also how those failures, had, you were forced to have to do something better because of like the legacy of failures that you're rooted in. I'm gonna shut up. I don't even know if I answered your question. I'm sorry. That was just really, focused on like the tech fail thing.
It's great. Kishonna, it's great.
Thank you.
Just the idea of not learning by doing, but failing better and worse. It's great.
Yeah.
That's where we are. I mean,
absolutely. And we also have to think about, like, are we okay with that? Like, is the system okay with just learning by failing? I think that's been like my whole mantra, like these past like few months, whenever I think about, because I was really bothered by. So it was a year has passed since the death of George Floyd, in Minneapolis, right? And there was like this tweet of where, I think somebody had, tried to, because every company, from the tech sector to the gaming sector, fashion, everybody like issued like a statement, right? Oh, we stand in solidarity, with Black Lives Matter. Oh, we stand, against like, let's stop Asian hate. All these folks like issued, all of these like beautiful like statements, right? And then so I, going and returning, somebody did like a whole thread of illuminating what has not been done by these tech companies, like what they have continued to fail to do, and what, so it's just like all like lip service, and they aren't doing anything. And I think that it's important that we kind of push the industries forward, to make sure that they start, like putting addressing what they say that they're going to address, and not letting them off the hook, just because, they're saying like issuing like these fancy statements, so, and I always think about, of course I don't have an impact on the whole world, but I'm thinking about what can I do like in the gaming space, right? So that's why whenever I'm like in the presence of like some of these industries and some of these professionals, I'm always, saying, well, what have you done since then? Because everybody, they always want to point back to like, oh, well, we did this then. Well, what have you done now? It's got to be continued growth and continue like moving forward, or I'm not going to be satisfied. Some people might be satisfied, but I'm not going to be satisfied. Ilaria, I think you were going to ask something. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm just saying, yes, of course. I mean, what you're doing and what you have been doing till now is going against the dominant narrative, the one that everybody speaks about when it comes in fashion. And then move ahead and move forward. You were saying beautiful statements. I will say beautiful hashtags. Because through social media, that's how they went. But the way in which, you go through all these relevant contemporary issues through in the game industry, the way in which game products are addressing or not addressing them, it's making a real difference because you are putting in the spotlight since years a lot of relevant elements that we tend to neglect or, I'm white.
Right.
We know that our industry, the game industry, has been led by white straight men for decades. But something is changing, and you are proving that very well.
Well, think about the work that you're doing, because think about how we got connected even. When I was introduced to you and your amazing work, and I think, yes, I see you pointing, absolutely. But I think it's really important that we show the global connections. I think it's also important that we show, you and, Francesca, the beautiful allies, folks who are willing to like do the work and, show, yes, let's shout that out. Ilaria, why don't you talk, like, I think it's important that you talk a little bit about your work, especially because of what we do is so connected, but I think you're using your platform and your structure in a way that I think is pretty powerful, especially when it comes to like design and intersectional design.
Well, that was because a dear friend of mine is very much into the LGBT and AI cause. And so we said, okay, let's do a game for speaking about that, being ironical, but nasty, and going against the main and the hegemonic culture once more. I have to say that to women dealing with that, a board game, card game was a little bit a crazy stuff because we went to play test in the LGBT circle. And the approach was not so nice because we found a little bit of fear in front of us. Like, okay, but are you joking on that? And we said, no, we are joking with that.
Yeah.
Not laughing about, but laughing off, in order to understand in a pleasant way how wicked we are. So that was the point of this contribution that led me to you and made us met in 2015, already 6 years ago. And
Wow.
yes, quite a long time. Time
Wow.
flies. Yeah.
Well, let's think about that then. What has happened in the industry during that time, right? Because think about, you remember the spirit in which, me and David, kind of put, I came to David like with the idea of doing like of woke gaming, because it was really on like the backs of Gamergate, right? And all this negative framing, all this negative imagery, all these negative stories, and for me, I'm big because I'm rooted in Black feminist thought. And one of the major tenets of like Black feminist thought is self-definition and defining your own narratives and writing your own narratives or reframing like all the narratives, especially like the negative, right? And so in that moment, I was like, why are we letting the industry dominate, what this gaming conversation is like? Sure, yes, we have like these problems and they've been there, but this is not, what the bulk of our experiences like are like within this space, right? And so that's why, with me and David, we were like, okay, yes, we're going to highlight, just how endemic misogyny is and patriarchy and racism and homophobia and transphobia. We're going to like talk about how all those things are like embedded in gaming culture. But we've got some highlights and we've got some jewels and we've got some gems of folks like who are doing like this dope stuff, like this major stuff, right? And so, what we published that, 2015, 2016. And so if we think about like a timeline that's happened, so Gamergate, was happening right there, in
Yes, I was in New York in that moment. It was...
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
you were?
when Sarkeesian were, in 2015, when and Anita Sarkeesian was having a talk in the Game Center of NYU, and I was there for my PhD period abroad, and it was just, I saw it so close because I was there, but I think that if I were here, I wouldn't have seen that so deeply. Because, it sounds far away when we have an ocean in between. But the fact of being there actually made it protests going ahead on the bottom of the street and having the thing for checking if you're bringing arms and weapons with you before entering the talk. That made it very real and close.
Real for everybody around. Absolutely. That's powerful, Ilaria. I don't think I realized, you were like in New York, like at that time. That's so interesting, and I think it's also important that we think about these issues like really like in global ways, because think about how Western and how Eurocentric, like a lot of these like conversations are. So I think it's important we think globally. We got to make sure that we incorporate like the global South like into conversations, because so many of these things are like happening, especially for the most marginalized among us. Like they're already happening, and then they eventually like trickle over, and it's like the spillover effect. And so they don't, bother privileged folks until like it's like a point that the pot's gonna burst, and like it impacts them. I often think about that, especially like when so many people, our previous president, like a lot of folks were like, oh my gosh, we have to do something, this person's our president. And then women were like, okay, but misogyny's been a problem. Black folks are like, racism's been a problem. Like none of this is new just because it's new to you. And I think that's why I love that Saturday Night Live skit so much. Like if folks look that up, it was Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle. Of course, they're problematic, but this skit was a special skit about the white friends were like, oh my gosh, this person's president, and then the black dudes were like, okay, and like our lives are still going to be awful because they've always been awful. But I think that was one of the things that even happened like with Gamergate. There was so much spillover, from the awfulness of those actors that were a part of like sustaining the harassment campaign, that even the industry, the neutral people, right, the people who mostly just stay silent, the neutral people were like, okay, something has to be done because this is like too much. And I'm like, yeah, it's in your face now. But I always think about how far like have we come. that book is still so relevant to right now. I'm even thinking about like the opening intro, that me and David had there. It's still so relevant to like the time that we're still in. And I think, it's good for us because that gives us plenty of stuff to always. I got plenty of content. Hey, I'll write another book. I'll do this stuff. But then you wonder, like, when is the growth going to happen? When are we going to like progress to like a place where we're, elevating like the conversation and going away from just talking about what the problems are to like actually solving them and having, like some kind of structural, having some structural interference that can, combat like all of this stuff. I don't know when we're there yet. I have no idea. I'm gonna be quiet there because I think y'all might have like other questions that you're gonna ask, and I'll just keep talking because I'm just so excited to just be here in this space with you all. I'd like to just chat with you face to face. It's bringing me a lot of joy.
Yeah. It's actually interesting you talk about Gamergate because it's true that here we lived it like something far away, and we didn't realize what was going on. And I'm asking you, after Gamergate, what have actually changed in the game industry and also in the approach in designing games?
I think it changed a whole lot, actually. Maybe not in a way that we can like, see it like on a with a telescope, but with a microscope, we can actually see that. And that's okay. I know that sounds bad, but I'm okay with incremental change because it shows, there's movement, there's growth. So I'm okay with that. But some of the things that so I'm thinking about my neighbor's dog is out. I hope that's not too distracting. Let me know if the dog, okay, good. So one of the things that like, prior to like 2016, I didn't have relationships with gaming industry, right? And so now, like every other week, there's like some industry like professional that's like reaching out and it's like, hey, Kishonna, we need consulting work for this. Hey, Kishonna, we're trying to do this. Like, so these folks are like interested, and invested in wanting things to be better, right? Thinking about even like, for instance, it's Pride Month. Think about, even though, they're commodifying and commercializing, of course, queer communities and like our narratives or whatever, but at least, there's more visibility. And I think it's just like a pathway of where you see the visibility. And then, I guess the thing that I'm nervous about is that so many of these folks who are in like vested will just stop at the visibility part, right? And they'll do that surface level change, but won't change the stuff that's underneath, like the design things, right? You're not going to change the things that you're doing there.
Greenwashing.
Yes,
Greenwashing
absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing that just really concerns me the most, right? So for instance, you think about, let's say a gaming company, incorporates like more diverse characters and more diverse representation. And then they're like, oh, look, we have these women of color. Oh, look, we have these South Asian characters or whatever, right? And then they think that they have to stop right there. But the question that I'm going to ask, I was like, well, who's on the design team? What does your applicant pool look like? Like, is it diverse? Do you have a diverse set of like folks that are there? What's your grievance process? Let's say if, somebody's experiencing like harassment or somebody experiences something inside your company, what's like the pathway for them to like, be able to say something? Are you listening to like women's voices? Are you like folks of color, like at the table? Like, how much money are you investing? Like, so there are other questions, but I think so many folks just think that they have to just have that representation piece and then that's it. But that's also the problem with the DEI, framework, the diversity, equity, and inclusion like framework. There's really no like at the core of that, there is no anti-racism. There are no like approaches, that will allow us to, for instance, don't account for like stop Asian hate. It doesn't account for all of these nuances and intersections because they're like, well, the presence of people is enough. And, we're like, no, it's not. That won't go far enough. But in thinking of, more about like design, a lot of folks like reach out to me. They're like, Kishonna, we want to do better. What can we do? And I always give them, like that kind of advice. I'm like, well, you talk to me, but who else are you talking to? Like, I can't speak for, the entire, POC community. I'm like, are you bringing other folks like to the table? But also I'm a very privileged person. I'm an academic. Are you talking to like the activists? Are you talking to like local folks? Are you talking to like actual like developers? Are you actually going outside of that and getting some historical context, excuse me, like if you're wanting to like do those kinds of things like in your game. So there are a multitude and a range of things that folks can can do. But I guess I'm just glad that they are aware. Like, so before they do something, at least they reach out to, folks like, like me, Sam Blackman, Treandria Rustworm, we have like a good number of like folks that people can reach out to. And so I think that in that regard, it's getting a little better. We're not there yet, but I think, so many of them like acknowledge that there's a problem and they want to do something about it. They just don't know what it is yet. So I'm okay with starting at that place. Yeah.
Well, the starting point is speaking about it, being aware about it. And the next is, okay, how can we embed it? It's not a matter of being inclusive in terms of including people. It's not just about it. Because diversity, minorities, vulnerable groups, we have a lot of things to say. And the diversity is varied in its forms, but it's not just a matter of speaking, it's a matter of being part of a process. So including diversity into the process so that it can emerge and surf, not just the bubbles here and there, sparking bubbles as the ones that we saw because of the Gamergate and what it triggered, but a change from the core of the industry. We are not there yet because we know that the AAA and how it goes. But still, in the indie panorama, for example, the stories, the perspectives of the not white straight men are increasing so much. That's great because it's emerging at secondary, third layer, and it's not just a different story, but it's becoming normal story also, that one.
That's so right. I agree. I'm so sorry. I was agreeing with you. My apologies. And I think that's where, the things that you do are like so impactful, because like so many folks like ask me the question about what can they do to like, improve like the design of like the products and the goods that they make. But I also have to tell them, I'm like, there are other people that are equipped for that, right? Like me, I'm more of like that, the big, like the theoretical thinking and like,
the big picture. You are the big picture.
Oh, that's a hashtag right there. I love that. I love that so much. But I'm thinking about, all that amazing stuff that you contribute and that you offer and that you bring, like to the table, So is it possible? Hopefully we have time because I would love for folks like just to hear about how you're intentional about putting the pieces together, like in your design framework and in your design practices. Do we have time for that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
8 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was not ready for that, but
I'm so
no,
sorry.
I mean, it's a pleasure. It's an honor for having you asking me that. Well, I've been very funded in, for example, asking students and designers in training to consider twine as a tool, or RPG makers and different tools that are easy peasy to assess and use, even though you don't have coding background. And I consider that a different inclusivity and accessibility element and frame, because they empower people to speak. And we all know what twine did, that is giving everybody the ability to build narratives in which you can make your own choices and see how the branches are spreading, how the nodes are bringing you on a path or another. And most of all, at the center of my focus, there is always the thing of representing yourself, expressing yourself, find a way for giving voices to people and experiencing experiences in an interactive way so that you can learn by experiencing something. So that's that's my belief. It's something that I fight for since ever. But let's be provocative in that. You are ahead of time. You have always been ahead of time.
Thank you.
And you were speaking in 2015 of walk games. And now it's still the same. I'm sorry to say also that, but when you go back to the introduction, a few things may be changed, but it's still there. And so you look so forward. My question is, what are you looking forward now for?
Oh my goodness. Okay, Ilaria, getting all philosophical and existential. My goodness, I love that question so much. It's hard to look to the future, you know? It's hard. I think a lot about, like Afrofuturism. I love Afrofuturism like as like a framework and like a concept, right? But I'm just thinking about, in order for us to reach those possible futures, those alternative futures, think about how much has to change in the now, right? Thinking about like how much we have to like fix, because I often think about, like, I love like time travel movies, right? So I'm thinking about, whenever they say, like, whenever you go back and you change something, like we continue on like an alternate like paradigm, like an alternate like trajectory. And so I'm wondering what's like the ripple effect thing that can happen now, so we can, like, change our pathway. Because, like, for me, whenever I see whatever, I still see, a lot of anti-blackness. I still see, I'm thinking about like all the Me Too movements that still need to happen. I'm thinking about like all these things that still haven't happened that need to, right? So for me, anything short of like a revolution is not gonna like really give us like enough of a ripple, right? And I hate to say that because I don't want to be doom and gloom. But I often like think about how important it is to make sure that we start to like create and imagine like the world and the futures that we want to see, right? There was I hope I'm keeping an eye on time. I promise that, I'll be short. I won't be too long. But there was we were talking about like a movie genre of where they spend so much time in like this awful space and this awful world, and then, like, like the last like few minutes they give you like, oh, well, this is like the future that we actually want. This is like the reality that we want to see. Why can't that be the whole movie and the whole theme, right? There was also something, I'm also thinking a lot about like police abolition, that people can't imagine a world without the police, right? And I wish that people would like do things to show the world like without police. But whenever we show that, we show like a world of chaos and we show a world of anarchy, because it's saying that that's like what the alternative is. And that's just like not true. So I think what I love, the work that you do, you're creating like the future that we want. You're creating the world that we want, like in the games that you're doing. And then whenever I talk to people, I encourage them, and hopefully I can inspire them to be the change that they want to see in the world, and just do it so we can create these alternate futures and these alternate paths, right? So in the future, I'm working on like, like what like a Black game studies like kind of like looks like, because I think we've missed our moment of talking about like race and gaming in significant ways. We just haven't really done that. And so I'm really hoping to like, infuse a lot more of those conversations and really elevate, because we've done a great job, with feminist game studies. We've done an amazing, beautiful job with queer game studies, but we really haven't, like really addressed like race game studies. And that's where I'm hoping to like, show like the intervention. Okay, I'm shutting up now in case you had something else. I don't want to, hopefully we're okay on time.
Fra, I leave you the stage. Go ahead. Do you want to close? No.
Oh,
Fra?
that's okay. Is that me?
No. I was speaking about Francesca because
Okay,
I didn't want to monopolize.
Yes, we have 3 minutes left, actually. I'm very interested in what you are done. Of course, I work in the field of communication design and gender cultures. So how media perpetrate discriminations and how to form conscious designers. So who can design with awareness, let's say. And so I keep listening to you for hours, and I'm actually very interested in your work. And maybe it's just my impression, but I think one of the critical points is that when we talk about this kind of issue, we always talk about inclusion in the professional field, which is, of course, fundamental, and the representation of, for example, minorities or women in the media and so on. But we never speak about accessibility, and I think it's a fundamental concept in this case. And so I think we just have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think it's important. I heard what you said, and I thought was so important about how we have to create the people and put them in like those positions of like power, to be empowered to create these things. But I also think about like how much our academic programs, especially like our training programs, how much is like missing, because I think we focus so much like on the technical aspect, we forget about the human aspect. And so I hope like different kinds of, degree programs and, academic programs, I hope we can bring the human side back to it, because like you just said, Francesca, we'll think about the accessibility piece will be there. Can all humans interact and engage with this? If they can't, how can we figure out like the pathways and the modes so they can participate? So Francesca, I think you're spot on. Yeah, absolutely.
We need more than 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Let's look for hours in which to unfold it.
Absolutely.
Kishonna,